Welcome, everybody. I am so looking forward to this. This is going to be fun. My name's Jennifer Gottwald. I'm a licensing manager at WARF, and I'm excited to welcome you all here for the first of what we hope might become an annual event. At WARF, we have a program called the Accelerator Program. Some of you have been involved in it. It's a program whereby we look at promising technologies that need more development to get to a commercialization stage before we can engage a company to license the technology. And it has two aspects to it that advance those technologies. One is that we can provide some funding to advance those technologies, but second, and I think very much more important, is we have industry consultants who work for us in 5 different market focus areas: food science, biopharmaceuticals, clean technologies, computer science and engineering, and medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. And we get together with these experts, all of them together once a year. That day was today, so they're all exhausted, and I'm glad they're doing this with us today. I know I'm exhausted. But we thought this program is really starting to show some success. We're starting to see professors who are commercializing their technologies either through starting startups or working with existing companies with WARF, so that we're getting their technologies out into the marketplace so that we can actually take the research at this university and get it applied to make a difference. So we wanted to show you some of these success stories, and so you can become inspired by this and also share the expertise of these amazing industry consultants that we call our catalysts to get some more ideas going on this campus and in this community about moving innovation out and actually making a huge difference in the world. So from the Accelerator Program, like I said, we're gaining traction on this. We've had 20 licenses on 13 different technologies coming out of this program so far, and 9 startups formed on technologies coming out of this program, which is great. So that is what we're going to try to show you today. Because it is the end of a long day for a lot of us, we're going to try a relatively new cascading panel format for this talk. So what we're going to have is 3 15-minute increments. We have a giant clock in the back, and I'm going to be the person who is watching that giant clock, and I'll be the bad guy who says the clock is up, we have to move on to the next panel. We'll have 3 different panels up here for those 15 minutes each, and they will be able to address just a couple of questions in that 15 minutes. Hopefully at the end of each panel, we can take 1 or 2 audience questions, and then at the very end, we should have time where the audience can address questions to any of the panelists. So I'm going to work really hard on that, and I'll be the bad guy. After this session, we're going to have a reception that we invite you all to out those doors, into Steambox, out onto Orchard Street if the weather is nice. So we hope you'll join us for that. That'll be going till 7 o'clock and should be very nice. And I tell you that now because if you don't get to ask your question or you see somebody up here that you really want to follow up with, that will be your chance to follow up with them. I know a couple people have to run, but most of our panelists are going to be here for the reception as well. Because we're doing this so quickly and so chaotically, but hopefully smoothly, we're not going to do individual introductions of our panelists. You will see their headshots on the screen behind them and who they are. And again, if you want to follow up with them afterwards or us, we can tell you more about the people we've chosen to be panelists. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Lee Kagan, our Chief Technology Commercialization Officer at WARF, and the person foolish enough to agree to moderate this and keep it going. So thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome everybody. It's great to see such a big turnout here. We thought this would be a really interesting and fast-moving topic for you at the end of a long day. It was an open invitation, not limited to the Accelerator Program alone, and it's great to see so many people from campus here, in addition to the folks who participated in the day's activity for the WARF Accelerator. So let me invite our first group of panelists up here. Those are Jordan Sand, Chris Salm, Karu, and Jeff Thomas. And the thing that draws these people together is these are 2 new startups here in Madison that have come out of Accelerator Program supported technologies. And even more interestingly, ones where a catalyst associated with the market focus area that supported the technology is an integral part of a founder or an executive in the actual startup itself. So let me start with our 2 catalysts, Chris and Jeff. Maybe I could ask each of you to tell the audience a little bit briefly about the company and what led you to found it, what you saw as exciting in terms of the innovation that's to be commercialized here.
All right. Chris Salm started Abbey Discovery along with Jordan Sand and Mark Cook. The business is got a mission, and the mission is to commercialize entrepreneurial science. It's fun to say, especially on a campus like this. We focus on animal agriculture and those discoveries, inventions, creations that happen in university research labs. The intellectual property that we've licensed is around the control of interleukin-10. And if you want to find out specifically about interleukin-10, we're down to 13 minutes and 50 seconds. You can go onto our website, www.abbeydiscovery.com.
I'm Jeff Thomas. I'm with Karu, and we founded a company called Simple Machines, and we're trying to tackle a corner of the server space, compute space, that's really not been well addressed up till today. It's been ignored by the large companies, and so the attraction for me to starting this was the realization of the potential to be able to do something that, once again, is market changing, sort of similar to those of you who know about NVIDIA and GPUs, to come in with that type of change into the marketplace. But for me, maybe more importantly, to look at what Karu is doing and realize this is the opposite of everything I'd done for my whole life, right? It always been high speed, high power, big chips, no room, horrible schedules, a lot of stress, and boy, you get to work on something that could change the world, and it's low power and a small chip and low cycle time and a straightforward design, and that was really exciting for once to be able to go do something that just wasn't going to take years and years and years to get right and go out.
Great. Karu and Jordan, I think you are both first-time entrepreneurs in helping to found and launch these two new companies. I would be interested to ask what led each of you to take that huge step of starting a company, and if you could comment on sort of what you learned about the commercialization process as part of going through the Accelerator Program and interacting with the catalysts who are part of your market focus areas.
So I guess for me, I grew up on a family farm in North Dakota. You're basically your own boss there too. The idea of working for somebody else didn't sound particularly appealing to me. So I had been looking to start my own company for quite some time, which is why I started working with Mark Cook and got connected with Chris. As far as what I've learned under Chris, the thing that has surprised me the most is that we had the opportunity in our first year to start making sales to a very large feed company, except we would have to cut our price by something between 20 and 30%, and he told them no. And just the idea that your product is worth it, setting a value for your product and sticking by it, has been a valuable learning experience for me.
Yeah, so for me, I'll give you a somewhat our answer of what actually led me to think we should do a company. It was really the end of Moore's Law. You would think, why would someone want to do a chip company when Moore's Law is ending? And really, it's because now, if you have a cool new design, Intel or nobody else has an advantage from just how the transistors are made. So it made very clear that the business opportunity was finally there for a new design, if it could get a design win, to really take off in the market. And we've been doing this research in my group over many years, and now is when the product and business opportunity arose. And in terms of working with the Accelerator Program and such, the experience for us was really useful in the sense that we could actually incubate a lot of what essentially wouldn't be called research, but would be product development in the confines and the sheltered environment of the university, without having to be racing against a clock and having to be doing a gazillion different things like raising money, running an office, hiring people, all these other things you need to be doing if you're actually running a company. So that was one of the kind of infrastructural benefits, if you will, of having the Accelerator Program. Of course, it was great in helping of finding a great co-founder in terms of Jeff in getting this company going. And those were the three main things that kind of specifically and more broadly was a role for how the Accelerator Program helped us.
Let me ask all of you, in launching new companies, I'm sure there's some number of things you knew would be challenging and you expected, building a team, raising money, beginning to lay out your development path to market and so on. Could you comment about things that were surprising to you, things you're learning early on in the course of starting to build these companies?
I don't know, I guess I'll start. For those of you that are researchers here, I think one of the surprises was the impact from Bayh-Dole on federal funding, and really thinking about how to manage that and what that meant with respect to going out as a private company and making that work.
So the most surprising thing, what I found, was how helpful everyone was. Seriously, because I mean, other entrepreneurs I would talk to, they would be just so helpful. I was like, oh, we can hook you up with this VC, we can hook you up with this, we had this problem. They would just dump all this information on me. I just met these guys. I'm like, wow, awesome. So what I would share with you is, if you start doing one of these, don't hesitate to go ask people for help. They will totally help you. I was just like, I was blown away how helpful they were. And I was coming from the academic community where people are essentially there out to kill your papers. Very opposite of being helpful. I mean, I needed to get that out.
Okay, that's enough of that. So, not surprising to me was the ability to raise money. There's a lot of money in the world that's looking for a place where it can be beneficial. There's a lot of money in the world. Hiring people, not really difficult, because there are a lot of people that are really, really smart, like Jordan, like Kerry Cook, like Don Burge, like Gil Bolt, like a number of folks that long for the opportunity to be inspired, that want to make a difference in the world. And if you lay out the challenges well enough and the dream for the future well enough, people will just climb on board, and they'll do it for next to nothing. They'll come on board for next to nothing. They'll take pay cuts. The most challenging for me was the very first block of our work, and we have 7 blocks that we go through. The very first block was to challenge the work that was done in the university research setting, in real life production. And it took us 2 years to really know how to address the, not necessarily the shortcomings, because they aren't shortcomings, but the implementation factors that weren't quite represented in the laboratory experience. And we've now overcome those hurdles, and we've got a pretty fun path ahead of us. So that was a surprise.
The fun path was a surprise?
No.
I guess for me, echoing what Karu said, the personal relationships involved and how important they are, and how important they are to build them, and how important it is in a mentor and a CEO and the people around you to have those connections and know those people, and how important and how much that drives the company forward has been really surprising, and in a pleasant way, I guess, because as Karu said, they will just dump a bunch of information on you, whether you've just met them or not.
That's an important point. So we've been in the information age. I don't think we're in the information age anymore. I think we're in a relationship age. Everyone is so interpersonally connected on the planet that things get done because people have personal commitments to other people. And information is, enough information at your fingertips? You can get it. You can get it.
So I'll throw out one other surprise, and that's that in today's world, the popular wisdom is you can't fund a hardware company, and you certainly can't fund a silicon company. And yet we raised our seed round funding, the bulk of which came from the state of Wisconsin, which was totally amazing to me. I never would have predicted we could do that, take a chip company here in the state and do the fundraising. So,
Actually, that sort of goes to my next question. Madison is a great area, and the majority of the new startups that have come out of the WARF Accelerator Program are Madison-based, which is great. Can you comment on what you see as some of the strengths and weaknesses of being located in Madison as a startup in each of your areas?
Yeah, we ended up in Madison for a couple reasons. One of which is the state offers an interesting tax credit for new businesses, which requires us to be headquartered and have the bulk of our staff here. And it's a interesting advantage for investors in the state, so it was worth doing. But more importantly, we had a team of people here, right? Karu had assembled a team. He'd been able to keep them together, working. We didn't have to displace them, ask them to move or do anything different. We could just have them stay here, and we get exposure to a continuing stream of new talent, of interesting people that can help the company going forward. So it wasn't a hard decision to make at all about being here in Madison.
So the benefit to being in Madison is driven by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the depth of knowledge and experience that resides not only within the professional staff at the university, but also within the students that are trained and developed and educated and inspired. That's the benefit. The negative for being located here in Madison are the direct flights out of Madison Airport to, where are the direct flights to?
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. There you go.
Chicago. Come on.
So
Chicago.
so that led us to our most recent hire is an accredited pilot. So
Before I turn it over to some audience questions, let me ask. So far, let me start with Jordan and Karu, if I could. How has your actual experience in starting these companies mapped to your expectations prior to making that decision? Are you doing about what you thought you would be doing? Are you doing totally different things? How has that been going?
I guess I don't know if it matched my expectations. I guess I kind of take it as it comes, but I guess it's different in the way that I'm not doing as much research as I thought I would be doing. I'm doing a lot more implementation and solving problems around implementation that I didn't think about before we started it.
So, first of all, I should qualify my answer by we've been around for less than since we had our funding. But I've had some surprises. Day before yesterday, I was delivering a burger to one of my employees. So I wasn't expecting I would be doing that. But he did something good, and he said, "Do you want ice cream or burger?" And he said, "Burger." So I said, "Here's your burger." So, I mean, it's kind of what I thought it would be. It is one of the things I thought that I would have to be multitasking and thrashing a lot. Like I said, we've been doing this for about 3 weeks. A lot of fundraising, and so far that's not been the case. And maybe because as a professor, I got reasonably good at multitasking. So it's about what I expect, and I don't have a whole lot of experience to really be answering that question, to be honest.
Great, thanks. That's wonderful stuff. Do we have any audience questions we can have this wonderful panel answer here? We've got just another minute or two to do that. So if you've got a question you'd care to ask, I think we got a microphone or two out there. Just raise your hand.
I guess this question is more for Jordan and Karu. I was going to ask, how do you kind of balance the wearing the academic and the company hat? And you kind of just answered that. But I guess if you had to do something differently starting from the start, would there be anything?
I think in my case, having Mark Cook, who started 3 or 4 other companies beforehand and understood how long we would need to incubate on campus, and really realizing the benefits of that, it has eased the transition because of mistakes made previously that I didn't have to make, if that makes sense.
So the only thing I might have done differently is, so I'm going on full-time leave to do this company. So I might have gone on full-time leave even earlier.
With more time before actually starting the company, or
Yes,
just to get it started
if I
sooner?
could find a way to afford it, go on full-time leave, somehow fund myself even though I didn't have money, and then still do it.
I think I have time for one more question if there's one out there. Otherwise, we can move on to our next panel. Any other questions? These folks will be around afterwards if you want to mingle and ask questions one-on-one. Thank you all. Let me invite our second group up here. Dave, Jim, and Melanie, if you could join us up on the stage. The theme that brings these three individuals together is they are all entrepreneurs from academia, starting here at UW-Madison, but each of these Accelerator Program projects is at different stages now of startup potential. Dave has started a number of companies. The one we're referencing here is called Salus Discovery, an Accelerator Program funded technology from our medical devices area that was licensed several years ago. Jim is a very recent startup. We signed a license agreement with Jim, I think in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, on that order. His technology was out of clean tech, as I recall correctly. And Melanie, you are thinking about starting a company. And your technology was from the medical devices area?
Yes.
Did I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just start asking each of you if you could give a brief description of the innovation you are currently commercializing or contemplating commercializing. Dave, maybe we could start with you.
So generically, our technology is sample prep. So how do you get something out of a mixture of junk? A blood sample, how do you get cells or protein out of it? And we came up with a fundamentally new way to do that uses surface tension instead of traditional washing steps.
We're developing a technology to replace antibiotics in biofuel fermentations based more on microbial ecology than the current approaches.
And we're developing a technology to to use blood proteins as biomarkers for being able to detect colorectal cancer as a minimally invasive diagnostic.
Thank you. Melanie, let me start with you. I'd like to ask each of you the same question. So what led you to decide to become an entrepreneur and think about starting a company or actually start one? That's a big, big change.
It really is. So one of the things that really has motivated me is this idea of being able to help people, and knowing that that colorectal cancer screening is a huge public health issue. One of the things that I wanted to do was go a little bit beyond the idea of just publishing in a peer-reviewed journal and being able to extend the technology out to the public. And the way I felt like I could best do that would be to actually try to commercialize a product and be able to do a clinical trial. And so what we're working on is assessing our current data and our preclinical data to see whether or not we will be able to launch that and start a clinical trial for this product.
But it's still debugging, it's answering the scientific questions rather than business questions that you're focused on now?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, some of it's scientific, but some of it's also business related. What we ended up doing is we found that my initial data was all geared towards screening for colorectal cancer. And when we went through and looked at what the customer base was and who our competitors were, we realized that there was actually a very large, steep uphill climb in terms of a clinical trial that would cost upwards of $150, $200 million. And in assessing our data, we were able to come up with some different other product configurations that would allow us to do to identify some different products that we could use to stage colorectal cancer and help patients that already have the disease. So basically what we did is we took the business data and the scientific data and kind of merged those together to try and come up with different product configurations that would be viable and that could still help patients.
Jim. The question was, what led you to become an entrepreneur, that being a big step?
Well, I actually arrived on campus almost 29 years ago, and I thought I was coming, although it was a faculty appointment, kind of as a postdoc in my mind, because I was going to leave and go to industry. It just took a lot longer than I thought. But,
You're finally getting there. Okay, well, congratulations.
So it's always been kind of a dream. I've taken business classes I've gone through. I'm also passionate about trying to get antibiotics out of the food supply, and a little bit of a control freak as well, so I guess I I've worked around enough large international companies that I'm not convinced that they could implement my technology, and so there's a sense of wanting to be able to control it until it's out in the marketplace at least.
Very interesting. Dave, how about you?
So I started my first company almost 20 years ago. And that company I started because I was just curious. Had a postdoc that wanted to start it, so let's do it. But now my motivations are much different. My current motivations are some of what was reflected here, but really I'm most interested in the end in helping people, and so I want to make a lot of money so I can give it all away, essentially. But I'm not waiting for that. My current company actually is already philanthropic. We have a project with the Gates Foundation where we're working very hard to apply this technology for HIV diagnostics in Africa, for example. And I realized probably 5 years ago that being in a company allows you to do so many things, particularly in the clinical area, than you can on campus, largely because of regulatory issues.
Jim, let me start with you on this question, because I know you have tapped into a lot of available resources on campus, some of them supported by WARF, others elsewhere in the community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the resources you used to help think about starting the business and how they played in the decision?
Really have used a lot of resources on campus. It really started with the Accelerator Program, funding the idea of being able to advance the idea where we're closer to being commercial. I then participated in the D2P program, which really helped us, what's a value proposition, how do you interact with industry, which was also very valuable. Worked with the Law and Entrepreneurial Clinic to put together our founders agreement and some other confidential agreements, etc. Worked with the marketing or business and entrepreneurial clinic to kind of come up with a strategy. Participated in G-Beta this last go around in order to develop how do you go out and really pitch your ideas to venture capitalists. And so every opportunity we have to learn more about trying to start the business, we've taken as we've gone through. And I guess also the office that also helps us put together SBIRs.
Mm-hmm. Dave, Melanie, any thoughts on that same question? I know, Dave, when you first started, there were far thinner resources in this regard than there are today, and yet there's still holes in the landscape we're all trying to fill. If you have thoughts about those, that would be also of interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging thing to try to bridge that gap. Yeah, I could go on for hours, but there's only 8 minutes, so I better not launch into my... I think I'll stop.
No, I think my experience has been similar to Jim's. I think what ended up happening with me is we had an idea, we decided to file an invention disclosure with WARF, and it just kind of cascaded into this additional set of resources that we were able to get through the University of Wisconsin. And so my advice would be to make sure you use every resource that you have on campus. And what we ended up doing is once we got the invention disclosure, then we were filing for accelerator funding. And in addition to that, WARF had pointed us in the direction of D2P, and I was part of the D2P Accelerator Program. And also I was also working with UW Extension on things like SBIRs and looking at getting those kinds of resources going. So my advice would be to try and tap your resources as much as you can on campus and make sure that you utilize those to the fullest extent. And the wonderful thing is that all of these people have connections outside of the university, within the community, and places like BioForward and other places or other connections that will help you. And I think it was pointed to in the last session that those resources are more than willing to help you and give you and download all of their knowledge and all of their resources. And it's kind of like you start on campus, but then you have this bigger community in Madison that's willing to help you out.
Let me ask Dave and Jim, do you have thoughts about what things would help you to grow the businesses that you've started more rapidly? Is it a matter of technical progress just takes so long and you need the breakthroughs to take the next step? Are you limited by capital? Is it access to channels? What kinds of things are high in your minds around growing the business from where it is today?
The lesson I've continually learned in companies is that you have a lot less control over how rapidly a product is going to move into the market than you think. You have very little. And the market, in some sense, drives that. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that, except to try to understand the markets you're going after and what it's going to take to get adoption in that market, and then multiply by some factor, because that's how long it's really going to take.
Things rarely happen faster than you think. Jim, how about you? I know you've got some interesting early discussions with potential commercial partners. Without revealing anything confidential, can you give us some sense for how you opened those up?
Some of it was really good fortune from some people in the room. And so Doug Cameron was around and helped me make some of those original contacts. So we started with 3 international companies as potential partners, really 4, but 1 dropped out fairly early. And we received our first offer today. And so that was exciting. It was not a great offer by any stretch, but it was the first offer. And it makes a huge difference where you start in a company. We certainly learned that. We started in one case with the chief operating officer, and we started at the other case just basically a cold call. Very different path. It's much better starting with the COO, put it mildly.
That's not a surprise. Well, let me open this up to questions from the audience. We've got a little bit more time this time around. I didn't mean to use all of it with our first panel. What questions can we have these folks answer for you?
This one's directed at Dave in terms of your research space. Your company's located in a really interesting location. It's not at Research Park. Can you talk about why you did that and what advantages you think it has?
Sure. So my company, Xalis, is located actually on the 8th floor above Collectivo on the square, complete with the BSL Level 2 lab. And it was basically 2 reasons. One, it wasn't any more expensive than any other space in town. 3 reasons. It's on my commute home on my bike, so I can conveniently stop there and check in. But really the most important piece is that's where people want to be, right? I mean, all of my employees, so we have 5 employees, they're all in their 20s. They love it, right? They're excited about being there. There's a bunch of other, the energy there is just, I find, much different than in a sort of traditional incubator space where you're out in the suburbs.
Any other questions on this topic? Let me add, I'm sorry, Michael?
Yeah, what's a skill or lesson that you've learned so far with doing a startup that you wouldn't have learned otherwise?
One I always cite when somebody asks that sort of question is there's no substitute for experience. And that's very different than academia. You can be a star professor if you're just really smart, right? But I find there's really no substitute for experience in business.
I would say the financial stuff is what been the hardest for me to come up to speed with. I remember sitting through my first 2 meetings, hearing the term EBITDA, and at that point I wasn't the CEO, didn't have a clue what it was. I'm now painfully familiar with what that means.
I think for me, some of this has just been a lot of just learning about what it takes to start up a company. I mean, all the desk research, all of the extra things that you need to know about customers, and just for example, just being open-minded to the idea that your product may change. I think when you look at your research from the perspective of being in a research lab for 8 years doing the same project, it's a little bit difficult to be that open-minded about what it is that you might need to do to pivot and change to meet the market that you might be interested in working in that space. So I think that's one of the big things that really changed for me.
I'd be interested in hearing how you're thinking about dividing your time. Are you going to continue as professors and at the university plus be with the company, or are you going to leave the university and be full-time with the company, or what sort of mix?
My dream world, I'd probably be half and half. I for a while I thought I would leave, but I've decided there's just no way you can replicate the innovative, cool environment we have in a research lab at the university, and I just enjoy that too much to leave it entirely.
Likewise, about 50-50 would be ideal.
For me, I'm a postdoc, so I think for me it would just be moving off campus and being 100% with the company.
Any other questions? We've got one. Gordon?
As you start your new company, is it appropriate to think at the start of an exit strategy, or is that a long-term thing?
When I started my first companies, I thought about that. Now I don't think about that at all. I think about the customer.
Every venture capitalist that we've talked to has asked what the exit strategy is, and so I guess we were forced to think about it. It wasn't an option.
I have yet to think about an exit strategy, but we're still working on the enter strategy. But at the same time, though, I think that is a really important question, and investors are always going to ask, what is your exit strategy? What is it that you want to get out of, for example, this round of funding? What is your goal in the end with this particular stage in your company? So it's an important question to ask. Unfortunately, I'm just not quite there yet.
Great. Look, let's give these folks a round of applause, please. Thank you so much for coming up. Really appreciate it. Let me invite our third and last panel up here. This is for the Catalyst perspective. We have Laura here from 3M. She is a new catalyst in the WARF Clean Tech market focus area. Got Keith Lobo, who has been involved with the Accelerator Program from its inception as a WARF trustee. His focus is computer science and engineering. And we've got Brad Henke coming up on the biopharmaceutical side. He's with Optimal Consulting and has been involved with the pharmaceuticals program for quite some time. Keith, let me start with you if I could, since you've been working with AP longest. Could you share some thoughts about how, with your background in entrepreneurship, which includes having founded and grown and sold several successful companies in Silicon Valley, what kinds of things inventors at UW-Madison can do to help create successful startups around their technologies?
Thank you. Well, I'm standing between you and cocktails, and I think you guys are not having enough fun. I'm going to start with two caveats. The first one is, I'm not going to give you any advice, because I think free advice is worth what you pay for it. So I'm just going to tell you what I tried to do when I was an entrepreneur. Then you can decide whether it fits. And the second caveat is, we have a room full of very smart people in here. As an entrepreneur, if you have a choice in life between being smart and being lucky, always pick lucky. So the first thing I wanted to briefly talk about was think big. Might have to start with execution at a micro level, but think big. This stuff is difficult to do as it is. And if you're thinking small, it's generally not worth the effort. So make no small plans, because they have no magic to stir one's soul. That's a rule that I used, and it seemed to serve me in good stead. The second one is look at building a team. No investor wants to invest in a single individual. It's too risky. All investors worry about the lead being hit by a bus and what the succession plan might look like. So invest in a team, build a team around you. Simple Machines guys did that from day one. They did it very well, at least in my opinion. So when they kicked off the company on the very first day of work, they had 10 individuals that showed up, and all 10 were ready to go. So Karu invested a lot of time figuring out what his team was going to look like, and a lot of people found that very attractive on the investment side. Third point I would make is spread the wealth. make sure your team is well compensated, make sure they have a good piece of the company. If you own 100% of your company and it turns into nothing, then you own nothing. There you go. The fourth, which I think Karu talked briefly about, is be humble. A lot of people are more likely to want to help you if you have some humility as an entrepreneur. So in this academic world, many of us might be 10 feet tall. But in the entrepreneurial world, all of us start at 3 foot nothing until we have proven ourselves. Very different environment, it's a very different set of stakes. And the last couple of things I would say is University of Wisconsin-Madison has a gold mine of an alumni base. That alumni base has tremendous experience. One of our earlier panelists stated there is no substitute for perspective and experience. It can save you as an entrepreneur an enormous amount of time if you hook up with the right experienced alumni, and WARF can probably help you do that. There's also a ton of resources on campus, all the way from all these different entrepreneurial clinics to the expertise that WARF can offer through the Accelerator, through Catalyst interactions, and a bunch of other similar things. So use them and you'll have a better chance to thrive.
Thanks, Keith. Laura, let me ask you. You're with 3M for some time, which is widely regarded, and justifiably so, as one of the rare, highly consistently innovative, but large companies in the United States. Could you share some thoughts about how a company like 3M looks at very early stage technologies that might be out of academia or a lab setting? How do they evaluate these? What kinds of things are they looking for?
Sure, thanks. So yeah, I've been with 3M for 29 years in a lot of different functions, and I just love to see the new business come about. And one of the sources of ideas for new things, of course, is from the university system. And the one thing that we have to look for, what we have to win in the marketplace is differentiation. Something really disruptive, something that's very compelling. So as you're researchers and you're finding where it is your passion is and what's going to be important to solve, and the first thing that needs to happen is that you as a researcher needs to feel that it's compelling and you can see clearly why. That I can tell you it's hard to sell this inside of a large company. There's lots of people, and really in the end, what's required is a vision of a compelling future and how this technology can help enable that. And that is a very strong thing that's really required for a go decision. It's pretty tough to get, but if there's not a vision laid out about why this is compelling and disruptive, it's going to be a tough go. So disruption and differentiation is something, of course, that we look for. One other point I wanted to make was that we're all working on some system, and we're all working on some part of some larger system. And we've seen some really neat innovations come by researchers stepping back and looking at the system as a whole and asking how could this be done differently to bring that differentiation, that disruption. Because sometimes if you look at the system as a whole, you could see that, well, this process, whether it's biopharma or whatever else, might have 14 steps, but if you did this second step really differently, you could eliminate these 3 and do this one differently. And a lot of times we find value in that, lots of monetary value to the customer that way. So think about the system that you're serving as a whole and look for where the system inefficiencies are, because that's where the money is, that's where the value is, and that's where you can begin to create value with an innovation or something different. I guess the other way sometimes is that a university might have something complementary to what the company might have. We have a lot of material science and manufacturing capability. One of the things that I'm interested in at the university right now is something around the data science area, where we have a lot of material science, but not so much vision science and these other kinds of things. And so there might be a really complementary thing where we could work together to, again, create the compelling vision and work together to really bring about something different. So that's a case where we could work together where the university research may bring insight, and that could couple with the capability that the company may have to be able to make it into a reality and really make a market impact. And that over all of it is the people behind it, and whether you believe that what you're doing is important, because it's the purposeful people that make things happen everywhere.
Great, thank you. Brad, you have really deep experience in the pharma industry, which is one that over a very long time has been hugely important to WARF and to the university from the standpoint of impact as well as commercialization success. Maybe I could ask you to share your thoughts about how pharma, the industry today, views partnering with universities around early stage technologies.
Sure. I mean, it's changed from the standpoint of essentially requiring more information. Pharma tends to, when I first started looking at in-licensing, it was, I've got a nice idea for a biological target, I've got a modality, protein, small molecule, and you could get pharma interested. The stakes have gone up from the standpoint of generating not just the reason to believe, like Laura talked about, but also somewhat of a reduction to practice and de-risking. And so I see that as something that is more and more of a requirement. And so I think translating that out then to make yourself attractive from a commercialization standpoint to pharma, it is going deeper and longer, incubating longer, and partnering with folks like WARF, other sources of income to take that project to a more advanced state. And that's maybe less true for platform technologies, but there's still got to be a clear reduction to practice and an approach to it. It's not just enough from an idea and an initial start, and that's how it's changed.
Could I add to that a little bit? I meant to make this point as well. And the rigor in your data and the analysis of it and the statistics behind it is, for any science-driven company, is going to be, you have to have it. It's table stakes. Yeah. So, because it is about de-risking from whatever point you're at. And so if it's solid data and you can really explain it well, it's required.
Mm-hmm. Helpful, thank you. So we've got a couple minutes left. Let me open this up to some questions from the audience. What can our catalysts share with you about their thoughts and perspectives on commercialization of early stage technologies? Let's have some hands out there, and we'll get some interesting questions answered. Justin?
Thank you all for the thoughtful comments. I just wanted to ask, so we've talked a little bit about the importance of a strong ecosystem, experience, leveraging successful alumni and that sort of thing. But can each of you kind of weigh in as to the level of importance for intellectual property in a successful endeavor, from a startup to launching a product within a large corporation?
I'll go.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to say it's absolutely critical in biopharmaceuticals. You've got to have something that is robustly protected, and that can be at odds at time in the university setting. Timing on filings is important, particularly in biopharmaceuticals, because of the long runway time between that discovery piece and then launch to a product. It's longer than for most of any other sciences that we're talking about here. So particularly in pharma, timing of the intellectual property, too soon is a problem, too late can be a problem, and then a robust protection around that is absolutely critical if you want to get interest.
I'm a very strong believer in IP. I think the deeper the IP, the higher the barriers to entry for competition. Personally, always attracted to situations where I can help build what I refer to as a market-making company. In other words, not the 20th or the 50th or the 75th PC company out there, but an electronics company that's doing something brand new that no one has ever done before and has a chance to become the best in the world at doing just that. And for me personally, in my experience, IP played a very big role. So my last company, which was the third startup I was involved with, and which I actually ran as CEO, we had 34 seminal patents in our space. Company was bulletproof in terms of IP. We got attacked 13 times by larger competitors who looked at us as blazing the trail of R&D for our industry.
Were they alleging you were infringing, or?
Oh, no. They were blatantly trying to infringe on our patents.
Okay.
Because we were running a business for 10 years that was generating 73% gross margins. So it was an intensely profitable business. And other people wanted to get in because there was great market demand in the semiconductor industry for what we did. So everyone's strategy was just follow that company and do exactly what they're doing, and you can snatch some market share. So we had 13 different legal attacks to try and essentially prove our patents as not being state-of-the-art in terms of the earliest art in the space. And we won 13 out of 13 times. It helped that we had a very strong balance sheet. We had 2 years of operating revenue and cash on our balance sheet and zero debt. So the company was financially very strong. But I'm a very, very firm believer in deep IP. Laura?
Yeah, and I'll speak for, at the larger company, at least at 3M, where our margins are higher maybe than our peer companies, and they need to be that high to afford what we try to do. So IP is critically important. I'll give you a quick story. I got the honor of working in our optical films business for about 8 years. And this is a neat story because we actually licensed into 3M the base technology that we had to then take a lot farther. We're able to make these optical films. There's 800 little nano layers in a thin piece of plastic-looking thing. These go into all, it enables LCDs, whether it's from phone to notebook to TVs, use light much, much more efficiently, to the tune of 40 or 50% more efficiently. So we worked very hard on that portfolio, the IP portfolio of that, and we had what amounts to a legal monopoly with such a strong patent portfolio around it, and we enjoyed that for a long time. They are actually beginning to those initial ones are beginning to come to an end, but of course we've been trying to build new stuff all along, and every time we think it's gonna fall, this big thing, and then we get a bunch of orders, and now the factory's busy and you can't get in and do an experiment. So it's all a good thing. But if it weren't for the IP position, that was highly profitable for many years. Now it took a while to get it going, but it lasted a long time. And now we want to take that technology and apply it to other things because there's changes in the display industry, and we will be moving on in terms of applying that technology to other things and developing new technology platforms as well.
Wonderful. We are out of time. We've used up our hour. Thank you three so much, and everybody for joining this. Hope you all found it interesting and we kept it moving quickly. All these folks are going to be around for reception, so feel free to approach them if you've got other questions that we didn't cover here. Let me just turn it over to Jennifer for a final wrap up on what's been a pretty amazing day.
So thank you, everybody. I want to just say thanks, everyone, for being part of today. All of you who came for this talk, if you have any thoughts about it, please let us know. I think you get a survey at the end because we'd love to share more of this expertise and be able to encourage more people on campus to think about entrepreneurship. Just before we go, to get a show of hands, how many people here have started companies or are thinking of starting companies? That's a fair amount. And how many of you have talked to larger companies about commercializing your technology, or they've shown interest in your technology? So we got some of that too. And at WARF, we like to get the technology out however we can. We just want to get it out there and get it best applied to the world. So Everyone help us do that and give us good technologies. And we're going to open the doors now. We have a wonderful reception. We hope you all network, because I think we heard today that relationships are so important. Everybody here, and we also heard that you can walk up to total strangers and they will give you lots of advice. So everybody practice those things, please. For those of you doing Meet the Catalyst, we'll have that over to the area here, and you know what time you're supposed to go to what table there. We're going to have food, drinks, and we have some part of the atrium and also part of Steambox, so keep wandering in that direction. And if it's not raining right now, we can go outside a little bit as well. So enjoy yourselves and network, and thank you so much for everyone who put together this great day.